The gin industry globally is valued at about just over $13 billion. In terms of the UK, it's actually quite surprising as well. Sort of 2016 was declared as the year of gin. So in the UK, it's pretty big. It's valued at $2.2 billion US. You've got Gin Umbrella, which is the Philippines-based brand. They control pretty much the whole market. But then what's quite surprising is Gordon almost controls nearly 50% of the UK market.
This country is the country that put gin on the map. It's the London Dry. You've got the Beefeaters, your Tanquerays, your Bombay Sapphire with their new unbelievable sustainable distillery. There is a passion for gin for sure. The percentage in the drinkers from what it was 5 years ago to what it is now, gin drinkers, has changed exponentially.
Last year was the first year that English gin sales have surpassed £1 billion here in the UK. And there's a few factors at play, really. If you're looking at it from the perspective of a few hundred years rather than a few decades, then it's really just a return to the norm. Gin was always England's drink. It's just that we had a little blip for about 50 years, starting in the middle of the 20th century when everyone briefly fell in love with vodka, but we're slowly getting over that now, and really gin is just reclaiming its place at the top of the pile. People are now perhaps looking for something with a bit more flavour, a bit more character, so I think that certainly has played a role. Gin has long been the bartender's best friend in terms of cocktail mixing, so that certainly has helped it along as well. So there's really not one thing you can put your finger on, but I think gin is back for good.
It's a Gin da Professore from Rome. The guys from Jerry Thomas Project, unusual because it's quite dark. It's a really spicy gin, so people really love it. We have the Queen's one, so it's basically gin made with Queen's. It's sweeter than our normal gin, so it's really nice in a gin and tonic, classic gin and tonic. From England, basically from Silent Pool. Refreshing and floral at the same time. You have some lavender coming through on the nose, and after when you taste it, you have the freshness from the kaffir lime. We have Elephant. As I mentioned before, we have the regular dry. This is the slow gin, so it's really interesting. It's an Hendrick's Sorbium. It's a new product that the Hendrick's made. So basically, it's still like with the cucumber. You can have as with the soda because you have the quinine already inside. So the quinine is the product that they use to make the tonic, basically. And another one that could be really interesting is also Bombay Sapphire. The difference is basically they change the color of the bottle. The customer, they're gonna see the bottle, they are already attracted. So that's mean that 50% of the job is already made. And after, if the product is good, you have the other 50%. Plus, of course, the service, and we need to teach them something about gin as well.
Unlike vodka, a mass-produced brand, gin is branching out into other premium sectors. That's why you've got things like the floral explosion, of spices and herbs being implemented and infused within gin for these smaller, more premium brands. And for example, the DIY, do-it-yourself, you can buy these gin packages where you buy, a very premium gin product, and then you can infuse it with the herbs and spices you like to do.
From the classic dry gin, we moved to flavored gin with a lot of different type of inspiration as well. You can have a Japanese inspiration. For example, we have Kinobi, is made with rice-based spirits, so it's quite, we can say, sake spirits. They have one that is with matcha tea, so you can get really, apart the botanicals that they use in there, like Sancho pepper, for example. For the South African inspiration, we have quite a lot of brands right now. One that I really love is Wheaten and Hill, for example, where they use baobab fruits. That is quite unusual. So a lot of different botanicals from South Africa as well. So it's a South African inspiration.
The trends that I'm seeing right now are about this fruit gin, about this fruit forward. It's the same with cider a few years ago. What happened there? We went from Strongbow to suddenly record leagues. It's a boom. People like to create flavour and then they like to see what they can do with that flavour. But nowadays what we're seeing, because there's so many gins out there, people actually want bigger flavours. We tried to create a super premium gin. An Australian dry gin in a sea of London dry was never going to work. What we have done is we've got a rare dry gin. Now, we call it a rare dry gin because we've done something slightly different. We've used botanicals that were never used before. No one had used lemon myrtle, which is about 90% more citral than a lemon. No one had used Tasmanian mountain pepperberry leaf, but now we have. The rare dry gin is our core brand. However, the gin that's been making serious waves in the UK and European market is our Bloody Shiraz. It's the first time a wine has essentially been used in production. It's got natural sweetness to it, which means the consumer likes it. It's quite versatile, which means the bartender likes it. So in all areas, it's doing pretty damn well. From start to finish, once you have all the ingredients, you can make a world-class gin in a very short amount of time, which means that the participation of an audience absolutely be able to see a sort of evolution over the case of a few hours.
We spent 5 happy years at the Portobello Star, but the brand and the Gin Institute had kind of outgrown their original home. We saw that this building had become available. It's a fantastic building. It was built 150 years ago as a pub. It was in a fairly sorry state, but when we managed to agree terms on the lease and start the renovations, it took us about 8 months altogether to do the reconstruction, and it now makes a fantastic home for both the brand and for the Gin Institute. And we were incredibly fortunate, really. I don't think there's a building on the entire street better suited for our needs. So we were very lucky. Gin's flourishing at the moment, so the Gin Museum idea came about, and that's where the Gin Institute was born. And then Jed, the founder of our company, suggested perhaps we could get people to make their own gin, and that really led to the birth of Portobello Road Gin when we decided to do our own. The way the Gin Institute experience works, really, our guests join us for about 3 hours at a time. We start in our little museum where we've got fantastic old bottles and books which help us tell the story of gin from its origins as a medicine 1,000 years ago, right the way through the gin craze of the 18th and 19th century, when gin was really a huge problem for London, through to the gentrification of gin and the modern golden age of gin that we live in today. So we do 1,000 years of history in about 1 hour there, and then they move through to the classrooms, which are attached to the distillery, and through there we've distilled the botanicals that go into gin individually. So what we've got is gin kind of broken down into its component parts, and we go through those with our guests, explaining what each botanical tastes like. You see all these ingredients written down on the labels of gins, but a lot of times people don't actually know what they taste like, what they smell like. So we get hands-on with those, and with a little help from their gin instructor at the end of the session, they select between about 7 and 12 ingredients they want to use, and we mix those single distilled botanicals together and create a completely unique recipe, which they get a full bottle of to take away. That recipe stays on file as well, so all our guests can just click onto the website and use their bottle, and we can reorder their own bespoke gin as and when they need it. They all get a bottle of Portobello Road Gin to take with them as well, and a good few drinks along the way. Everybody leaves with a smile on their face.
With our distillery particularly, we've recently purchased a timber yard, which we invite people to do tours all the time. We actually run a Four Pillars branded bus into the city of Melbourne, and we drive you out into the sticks. We give you a full tour. I believe that every distillery and every sort of spirit, if they fully respect themselves, will have some sort of interaction with their guests. They will be able to invite them in.
At first, Brexit was very beneficial to a lot of gin producers and suppliers. When we first had Brexit and Brexit took off, we obviously had a devaluation in the currency, and this really helped local breweries and small distilleries expand their exports. However, Brexit could apply sort of the handbrake to the booming industry of gin. Not only does the single market is really imperative to gin producers here in the UK, but it's also the rigorous sort of health and quality standards that is underpinned by the EU.
Part of the reason why people trust gin, and the reason why people know they're getting a good product, are the regulations surrounding the production, which many of those are written into EU law. So we need to be careful that we make sure that whatever replaces those regulations is as robust as it was, or perhaps more robust.
I think we'll get at least 5 to 10 years out of gin, just because the vodka craze lasted for a while. It kind of entered almost the stage that gin is, where there's lots and lots of flavours, lots and lots of different aromas that brands are exploring to try and extend that product life cycle. The gin industry has reached a very critical point, and it's quite hard for spirit brands within the spirit landscape to achieve longevity. But one thing is clear, that as people adjust to these premium offerings, they want to upgrade. So we've seen already there's lots and lots of micro distilleries becoming more premium, and people are going to want to tap into this. And we might even see consumers venture into what's called super premium. So this is like 45, 50 pound a bottle, really premium gin, and we could see consumers start venturing into those areas. I think the market can sustain the amount of micro distilleries and the microbreweries that we do have in the market, and I mean there's quite a lot. I think we can expect more to open up and more to sort of pop up within the landscape in the next couple of years as gin becomes, remains popular and even becomes more popular. I think they'll really enjoy, the new and interesting and novel flavours.
And gin could go one of two ways. The pessimistic side of me says that perhaps it goes the same way that vodka went 20 years ago. See the rate of new openings and new brands slowing down, and we might even see some of those smaller brands start to disappear, sadly, and some of the more successful younger brands being snapped up by larger multinational companies, and we'll probably see a bit more of that, the acquisitions in the years to come. The more positive side of me thinks that perhaps we'll go down more like kind of French artisanal spirit production has gone, where we'll have, some big successful brands which will go on to become global brands, but we'll retain small geographical pockets where people make gin for a very specific locality. Every small town and small village has a gin distillery at the moment, and perhaps if they can get a large enough market in their immediate geographical area to keep going, then perhaps we'll end up with a country full of small independent gin distilleries, which would be fantastic.